Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Castlevania Circle of the Moon. In the last one we reached the underground gallery after finishing off our time in the Royal Chapel for now. And now we're about to go fight the boss here actually, but first I made sure to farm up this heart right here to actually get my hearts back up to max, because you're going to want to have the ability to use the cross boomerang in this specific boss fight. Speaking of which, boss fight here is Twin Dragon Zombies. You're going to want to focus on one of these at a time, so stick to either side. While the hands look like they should be hitboxes, they're not. Both of them stay in their corners, with their heads and necks rotating in full circles to either aim the projectiles at you or ram into you directly. What I'm attempting to get going here is a bit of a lock, though, where I keep myself a bit safer. Namely, if you keep yourself between one of the dragon's heads and the wall that's next to them, they'll usually try to do their head slam attack, where they ram into the wall and cause rocks to fall at random. While that can come out of nowhere and blindside you in some cases, I overall prefer dodging that to dodging especially the dragon on the right's main projectile attack. Plus, when they're against the wall, they're actively in place long enough where I can get a couple of cheap shots in with the cross boomerang in specific. When they're not trying to do their head slam, though, each dragon does have a distinct projectile attack. Namely, the dragon on the right will aim projectiles directly at you, meanwhile the dragon on the left breathes fireballs in a spread shot that's easier to avoid the further you are away. I tend to focus on the one to the right first and get it into the head slam lock as well to avoid the directly aimed projectiles. But one thing to keep in mind about this fight otherwise is that they do have separate health pools, roughly 1400 HP or so each, I believe. But whichever one you kill first, its head will fall to the center of the arena, and after a moment, the remaining dragon will feast on what remains to recover about 300 HP in total. Which is kind of nasty sounding, but it keeps itself in one spot for so long during this that you can easily outpace that healing if you have the right setup, and it's a really handy moment. The really dangerous thing about this fight is actively underestimating the range of the dragons and where the safe zones actually are. Because you might think the platforms around the arena are actively safer to keep yourself on, and when there's one dragon left, they can be. When both dragons are active, it is much safer to keep yourself to the ground and be near any of the given corners, because then only one dragon can really easily attack you at any point in time. When I first played the game and when I revisited this on stream, this was probably my least favorite boss in the game. But honestly, between my practice runs and the main playthrough, this has probably become, if not my favorite boss in the game, probably second favorite, if only because there's an actual pattern here and there's methods to take care of it that are interesting instead of just trying to blitz through a health bar, which some of the other ones can kind of feel like. If there is one thing about this fight that can definitely be a difficulty spike, though, it's the HP pool, because 2800 HP or so between the two dragons is a lot to whittle down through depending on your resources. And considering that can be upwards of 3100 if you actively let them heal all the way up, that's actively more HP than the final boss has in total. And while it definitely isn't maybe that much HP compared to Andromelech's 1800, I think, it definitely weighs a little bit on the player. I think this game's boss pacing is one of its other issues, where some bosses have too little HP for the point in the game you're at, others have too much. And there's not really a good sense of balance with it, and it's not a factor of maybe getting over-leveled too often, I find, unless you're really grinding for those DSS cards and getting really unlucky with their spawn rates. It's kind of a bizarre case, honestly. And I think it's the only game in the series that gets this weird with it, outside of maybe bosses being really easy to whittle down in Harmony, really. Outside of using certain things like the Crusagram and the Shield Rod combo with the Alucard Shield, I suppose, in Symphony. For beating that boss, though, we get our next movement utility. This is the Heavy Ring. Certain boxes can now be pushed. So, you might have remembered those wooden boxes we saw back at the Chapel Tower, and there's actively been a couple of others that have been on screen, I believe. Now we can just simply push them out of the way. This is one of my biggest issues with Circle of the Moon. Its power-ups, their placements, and how they just lead to exploring the castle not being as satisfying as it is in Symphony or any of the games even after it, really. Before I get too in-depth on that topic, though, I'm going to talk about my next DSS card farm. Namely, the Man-Eater plants here in the Underground Gallery can drop a DSS card at a 1.5% base drop rate. And I was about to talk about how this is one of my least favorite farms in the game, and it can be, especially because I actively had a failed recording of this entire chunk of the game because the sound wasn't recorded properly. And in that recording session, it took me a while to get it. I got into my first actual part of the farm here. Oopsie. That's the Diana card. The Diana card at large makes it so that when Nathan swings his whip, a projectile is fired out of it in some form. With my current combos that I can do, the Salamander combo generates a fireball that flies forward slowly, the Serpent fires a short-range burst of ice projectiles that can freeze enemies, the Mandragora sends out 3 roses in a cone formation, I believe, the Golem generates a shockwave that moves forward similarly to the attack the Earth Demon uses, the Cockatrice combo sends 3 rocks out at completely random angles, I believe, the Manticore causes an upward swing that throws a poison cloud out, and for what we have right now, the Thunderbird electrifies your whip spin again, I believe? So, going back to this game's exploration with what the power-ups are. There are, in total, 8 different key pickups located throughout the castle, one of which is a very literal key to access the final boss. And another one of those 8 is completely optional, so that means across your journey, there are 6 notable upgrades you're always going to get that do something to Nathan's moveset. 1/3 of those allow you to interact with boxes in some form, be it breaking the stone blocks or pushing the wooden crates. This is just not very satisfying a way to block progression, in my opinion, as I think the masses of boxes can blend together across the castle. Meanwhile, more meaningfully distinct movement changes might have led to more distinct level designs tied to them that can stick out in a player's memory if they went to an area early. Not for nothing, this does lead to an issue across the later Castlevanias. They mostly use a lot of the same power-ups that you just get in different ways. But a double jump or a slide are just so much more meaningful in my mind an upgrade than breaking a box in maybe 20 rooms in total, especially when most of those are in just one area. And on a related note, speaking of the power-ups, I do think Circle of the Moon makes one weird choice in that I think it gives you the double jump too early for it to feel like a truly meaningful upgrade. Because by that point you can see maybe 4 rooms in total you can't progress past, and they're all right next to where you get it. Say that you got taunted by the double jump pathways a bit longer, maybe up to where we got the tackle shoulder pad that allowed us to break the stone blocks after the necromancer fight. That would be a more meaningful place because you'll have seen many more routes where that could have actively come in handy. Heck, maybe move the kick boots to there and put the double jump all the way at the top of the machine tower. You could then maybe have that area's verticality be focused more on figuring out ways to do platforming puzzles with the kick boots, and your reward is the double jump at the end of it to make traversing that area and pathways you couldn't reach in it prior a big oh yeah moment. There's just a lot of very weird choices in how this game is laid out with things like that mostly stick out to me, I think, because I've played just so many games in this specific genre, where when an element in this genre, or any genre really, is designed and placed really well, it just feels natural to progress through. You don't put a lot of thought into it. But when that element is done badly, or in this game's case, just really off-feeling enough to be distracting, you really notice why those elements are done the way they are in the really strong entries in a genre, I find. Mind you, I'm probably just more attuned to that type of stuff because I've played this genre so much, same with Mega Man adjacent platformers and RPGs. There are a lot of other genres, be it first-person shooters or otherwise, I just won't spot that kind of stuff as much because I have less experience with them, and they're also a lot less close to my heart, really. But I digress. At this point, we're back in the machine tower, coming from the main entrance, as there's several items I couldn't grab on my first visit because we didn't have the kick boots yet, and I didn't come out this area the way we came in, so grabbing them now is my best option, especially because my main destination here is to get the stopwatch sub-weapon again here, and take it all the way to the boss room where we fought the Iron Golem. Because now that we've defeated the Dragon Zombie, a new enemy has spawned in that room who has one of the rarest DSS cards in the game when it comes to the drop rate. On top of that, you need the stopwatch to be able to kill that enemy any kind of reliably with any kind of normal level curve, as it has too much HP and it's only on screen for a certain time frame. Oh hey, the stylish suit! Like I said earlier, that's a decent enough item if you get it in like the very early game, but at this point, it's a little bit lacking on the defense in my eyes. Worth noting, if you are going to do the specific DSS card farm I'm going to do while here in the machine tower, I heavily recommend, though it's not actively required, the Venus Manticore combo that actively doubles any hearts you intake, as since we're going to be using the stopwatch to kill the enemy in question, there are actively 2 of the enemy in question in the room, thus means you'll be using the stopwatch potentially twice on some visits, meaning you'll be using upwards of 40 hearts. And the thing is, there is a big heart and a candle to the left of the room where the Iron Golem was, and 2 in the room where we got the kick boots. But by default, that's only 15 hearts out of 40. Meanwhile, if you actively double the hearts with Venus Manticore, that's 30 hearts out of 40, meaning you'll be eating through your heart count a lot less quickly, and that makes it all the more worthwhile. The enemy we're here for is the Scary Candle. This is a mimic candle that is meant to surprise you in midair, dealing damage. They have 150 HP, so I need to hit them about 4 times to kill them at this point. But after they hit the floor, they start melting, lasting only a second or 2 normally, hence the stopwatch, and you needing to make sure your heart count can last longer. What's rough here is that both their common and rare drop are incredibly rare. Their common drop is a 0.8% base drop rate, and it's a heart EX that restores 50 hearts to your reserves. Their rare drop, though, is the DSS card we're here for, at a whopping 0.6% base drop rate. Not the rarest drop in the game, nor is it the rarest DSS card drop in the game, but oh boy, that's low. I counted about 72 kills here before the card dropped, and that's if I didn't lose count while making sure I lifted any hard EXs or level ups that happened along the way. And what's sad is, that's actively one of the faster times it's taken me to get this specific card to drop. With enough patience, it'll show up, and not for nothing, the card here is pretty worth it. This is the Uranus card. Worth noting because I am playing the original GBA release. Flashing light warning coming up here. The effect of this card was actively toned down in the Wii U Virtual Console release as well as the Advanced Collection release. This card's combos technically all have the same effect. It's more a difference of what element of damage they deal, how long it lasts, or how many hits it deals. Specifically, if you activate the combo then do a half circle upwards while pressing B, so down, forward, and up, and then B, you summon the attribute card's namesake to deal that element of damage across the entire screen. And as you can see, they flash the color of that element rapidly on screen, which can definitely be a lot on the eyes. Also worth noting, I did go back into the room just then. My goal there was actively to farm some extra experience technically, but I didn't get any levels if memory serves. My overall purpose was actively to farm the hearts from around that room to get my heart count back up to max because I used so many across that process. Some things to note about the summons. For one thing, they are some of the most costly spells in the game, so you need to have a lot of MP to use them several times in a row. For another thing, Nathan is completely invincible during the casting animation, so you can keep yourself safe from a lot of boss attacks while doing that. But the real thing to worry about is whether or not you actually hit the enemy at all. The damage the summons deal is dealt either by the enemies making contact with the summoned creature themselves, or the projectiles that happen during the animation. These are powerful, but I try not to overuse them throughout the LP, especially on bosses. I try to at most maybe only cast it during a boss once or twice, depending on the boss. There is one time I go out of my way to showcase a slight abuse you can do with them in a very specific area, though. If you know, you know. With that grind now done, it's time for us to head to our next destination, which is the area that's connected to the Triumph hallway right here. Something worth noting before we actually reach the area in question. The area we're going to next is technically optional. With that said, both in terms of level curve on top of just a specific mechanic, you're really meant to do this place before you go to the area that we're going to do after it. In testing, I did do a run where I finished the other area before the one we're heading into right now, and it was a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. For one thing, the upgrade we get in that area does smooth out this upcoming one a little bit, namely allowing you to grab some items in the first visit. But also once you defeat the boss in that area, new enemies spawn across the entire castle. And one specific enemy that spawns in the upcoming area can be a bit of a nightmare to handle at the level you'll be at when you tackle that area like that. Mind you, that same enemy can also fix that issue for you because that enemy drops some of the most experience in the game. But I'll talk more about that later on when I actively showcase that enemy when I do a near-end game farm for a couple of different things. Welcome to the underground warehouse. I'm not a big fan of this area. It's probably my second least favorite area in the game next to the area we're going to after this, honestly. But it does have a really good song, and that is actually a remix of Clockwork Mansion from Castlevania 4, which I think was the Stage 4 theme off the top of my head. It was either Stage 4 or Stage 5, I think. This area has one central mechanic, and it's tied to how we actually access it. We're going to have several puzzle rooms based around the heavy ring boxes, which is admittedly something they do with these boxes that's a little more interesting than the stone blocks that the tackle attack can break. So they do at least push this mechanic to its logical extreme. I'm just not a fan of doing it. Especially because there's at least one room where, for some reason, even though I know the solution, I still do it wrong in an order of operations manner. And I can't tell if it's that if I get a step ahead of myself, or if I'm constantly confusing it with another room in this exact same area. Cannot tell for the life of me. Now, I'm not doing it right now because I want to get through this area first, but the Archdemon enemy we saw in that previous room, the green version of the Beast Demon enemy that you can still dodge most of the attacks by just crouching underneath, they do actively have a DSS card to drop for us at a 1.4% base drop rate. And it does have a lot of really useful combos, but I want to focus on getting this area done first for a couple of scattered reasons, mostly experience level actually. But if you're more of the farming sort than me, they do actively have a very high chance to drop the curse ring we talked about earlier in the LP, the ring that boosts your defense and strength by 30 but lowers your luck by 100. If you can farm out 2 of those, since it is their common drop, that's actually a very effective way to help you during boss fights, is using 2 of those and then using the DSS combo that boosts your strength by 25%, as that really does build up those numbers pretty quickly in some cases. What you do want to be careful of in this area is the amount of damage enemies can do if you enter with some lower tier armor like I did on stream, if memory serves. And it's a factor of, A, I didn't remember where to farm at the time, but also I just got a lot less lucky on that playthrough when it came to enemy drops. I think I had, at best, the silver armor on, which is like 10 to 20 points weaker than what I currently have, and that 10 to 20 can really help you. Not to mention I was also just in general a lower level in that run because I wasn't farming for the DSS cards along the way as actively, because I have this very bizarre self-imposed rule where I always want to be making a decent amount of progress in any given video of the Let's Play or on stream. I always try to keep what's going on moving so I'm not hanging on one thing for too long. So due to that, the idea of staying in one place going back and forth trying to farm a upwards of 0.4% drop rate item just bounced off my brain completely, and it actually made streaming this game in specific a real nightmare of all of those games. Quite literally every other Metroidvania, Castlevania I played during that little marathon I did of them, which was all of them, by the way, except for Mirror of Fate, ultimately played out better because A, drop rates are better, but also B, the DSS is unlike later central systems in the series, like the souls or the glyphs, in that you never need to use it to beat the game. You always need to use the souls to do something in either Sorrow entry, and glyphs are how you attack, period, in Ecclesia. Using the DSS definitely gives you your strongest attack and defense options, but the state of it never being required means you're also much less likely to find any parts of the system along the way given the drop rates outside of the ones you're really meant to find in the early areas, like the Salamander card and the Mercury card, to give you an intro to the system. But in the original release, when you didn't have a way to tell what enemies dropped what cards outside of just farming every single one ad infinitum, it just leaves the DSS feeling like it takes an expert to play into it at all, which I think makes it feel a lot worse. Plus, not for nothing, if you know where all the cards are, it does lead to Circle of the Moon probably having the most stop-and-go farming in the series. Because the way I tend to farm in Castlevania, if I do it all, I tend to try and do a couple of ones along the way, but largely do the ones that are super important in a blitz at the end, so I'm always going somewhere where there's going to be something I need to grab. This is especially the case in Aria and Dawn due to the way the soul system works. And I think just due to the way that the Castlevania entries in this genre are set up, I find that more satisfying to do than, say, stopping and going, stopping and going, stopping and going constantly because I know a card is over there, or a card is over there, or I need to make a backtrack to an area far away from me because a new card spawned in there because I defeated a certain boss fight. Due to this, I do kind of look at the DSS similar to how I looked at the tag partner system back in Sonic Advance 3, where I see the glint of what they were going for, but I think in execution, it just falters. I think if they ever revisited the system and refined it, maybe making some of the cards pickups just in the map, some of them drop from specific bosses or mini-bosses, and then maybe make it so that you can go through the castle in a little bit more of your own order. You can maybe choose what side boss you want to fight for what card first because you really like this combo or that combo. I think that would generally be a more interesting version of this system. It does make me wonder, though, because I've only watched one little bit of pre-release material for Belmont's Curse, because that's meant to release still later this year, although I'm feeling it might come out in 2027 at this point. We'll see. I'm very curious at, A, whether or not it's going to have a central system at all, like the DSS or the Souls, to make it have its own little gimmick, and B, how they're going to interplay that with however unique the Belmont's mechanics are in that game. Because I've seen some footage, I think, where they're swinging around like they have a grappling hook and all that, which they've never really done that prior in the series to that extent, outside of one specific thing that Shinoa can grab in an early game in Ecclesia. I'm just very curious on how that game's going to turn out, because the first one like this we're going to have since technically Mirror of Fate, which I know some people don't like to count as one of these, but it ultimately does. It just so happens that it's a relatively bland and uninteresting one, outside of the occasional visual thing being kind of neat. I like the way the characters are shaded and all that. Either way, going back to the game, we have a new enemy here, the Holy Armors. These guys have pretty telegraphed attacks, but they're very damaging with them, so if you don't dodge them, watch out. Specifically, they poke their sword forward, slightly down, or slightly up, and it'll fire projectiles out of it. If it's straight forward, you can duck under it. If it's down low, you need to jump over it, but if it's high up, as long as you don't jump, you're going to be completely fine. The thing about them is that they do technically have a DSS card that we already have. Specifically, their common drop is the Serpent card, the Ice Elemental card, and it's a pretty easy way to grab that card. They drop it at a 5% base drop rate, which, with whatever your luck is at this point, it's probably going to be closer to 7 to 10%, making that a very easy way to farm it up. With that said, I would really recommend getting it when I got it earlier in the game, even with the more annoying farm, as being able to freeze enemies to use as platforms is much more useful in the early game than it is at this point, especially with a power-up we're going to be getting in the near future, basically making that ability nearly worthless. What is more useful to me at this point, even though I don't farm for it, is their rare drop. At a 0.5% drop rate, they have the Platinum Armor, which is a very strong armor. Equipping it, if it even drops, boosts Nathan's defense by 150, making it nearly double the strength of the Gold Armor. There are only 7 armors in the game that are actively stronger than it on a defensive measure. I would argue the Rainbow Robe we talked about earlier in the LP being technically stronger than it on a overall factor because that boosts so many stats. But if you can get that, it's one of your best options for pretty much the remainder of the game at this point, really. Which, worth noting, LP-wise, we're actively only about halfway through the game, but if you're just doing main game stuff and not worrying about DSS farming, you're closer to like 3/4 of the way through the game at this point, really. The only really rough thing is, if you want an armor that's like the Platinum Armor or stronger, pretty much every single one of them, with one exception, are only dropped as rare drops by pretty powerful enemies moving forward. So you really have to weigh whether or not the rare drop is going to be worth the process of farming the item up, especially in 1 or 2 specific cases that are dropped by the most powerful enemies in the game, pretty much, period. But with that, despite us not being near a save point, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're going to clear out the rest of the underground warehouse fighting its boss in the process before moving on towards our next major destination. See you guys then.